welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, David Icke is with us live from the UK. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. But that's not what's most important. Follow David Icke at David Icke. On Twitter, all right. Let's do this. David Icke, he's an English writer. We all know he's a public speaker, former media personality, best known for his views on what he calls who and what is really controlling the world, describing himself as the most controversial speaker and author in the world. He has written many books explaining his position, dubbed New Age Conspiracism. And he has attracted a substantial following across the spectrum. And his book, The Biggest Secret, has been called The Conspiracy Theorist's Rosetta Stone. It is not a joke. Today, his books are read all over the world, and his speaking events are watched by thousands on every continent. Why? It's because what he has been so derided for saying is now happening in world events. And even mainstream scientists are concluding that reality is indeed a simulation. We spent 2 hours last night on the show talking about this. Almost every day, something that David Icke said is supported now by happenings and evidence. And this is the point now where I just need to say, David Icke's time has come. His new book is called Everything You Need to Know, but Have Never Been Told. It is great, and get it. But tonight, get ready, because we are about to speak with the one and only David Icke. David, good morning, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, Jimmy. I'm fine. Well, I'm fine now. 20 minutes ago, I was blinking into the light, but I'm fine now. It's 25 to 4 in the morning here, so I'm just about up to speed, mate.
You know, David, we so appreciate every time that you join the show, and I'm so aware of the time, but this is the truth. And you know what? I'm just going to call it right now. How do you find the energy? Do you have a newfound respect for the Rolling Stones, right? I mean, seriously, what you do and how you do it and how you find the energy, and you've been doing it forever. Hats off, my friend.
Well, I don't know how the Rolling Stones find their energy. They may take a different method to me, but mine comes from just a passion for what I do, and I think an understanding that we have a window to alert people to what's going on, a window that the hidden hand that I've been exposing all these years is desperately trying to close by connecting the human brain, the human mind to artificial intelligence through that area that I call the Devil's Playground, Silicon Valley. So we have a period which we're in now where we have an opportunity. It's a kind of a meeting of the ways, in the sense that we have come so far along the road that I've been writing and talking about all these years, in terms of the plan for the totalitarian control of the entire human society, that it's becoming more and more obvious. I said years ago, there's going to come a time when they'll break the surface. They have to, because if you are manipulating something under the radar, which is where it's been happening most of the time up to this point, then if you want to transform human society in the way that you're manipulating, then at some point you have actually got to break the surface where people can see that that's what's happening, that's what you're doing, and that's where we are now. So it was always going to be a point where we were a long way along the road before people actually, in large numbers, and I'm seeing this now around the world on this speaking tour that I've been on for 18 months, it's happening everywhere, they would see that actually they can't ignore it anymore because it's in their faces. So that's why I get up every morning and bang on with it every day, 7 days a week, because we have this period now where more and more people are listening. What is happening is more and more obvious, and we need to alert as many people as possible to head this off, because people have noted how many things in my books over the years, going back to the 1990s, have actually turned out to be true. But I mean, why is that? Very simple. There is a plan for the world. It has been unfolding for a very long time. And if you can access that plan, then you can comfortably predict the future, not just in theme often, but in detail, because unless there's an intervention, that plan will unfold. This is why Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, published in 1932, George Orwell, 1984, published in 1948, that's why they've been so accurate.
Right.
It's because they weren't coming just from their imagination. They had also got access to this projected agenda for the world. And if you do, then you can predict the future. The idea, of course, of people like me and what I do is to stop that future happening by alerting people so that there is an intervention.
Let me jump in there for a second, David, if you don't mind. I last saw you September 19th last year in Los Angeles. We all know about what has happened in the last year and a half. That's been extraordinary. I don't want to address that just yet. Let's go back to the last 20 years for you. Are you at the point, and it's okay if you say yes, are you at the point where you can stand up and go, see, I told you so? Is that part of your ego? Will you, because you have a lot of people that need to hear just that. Are you at that point? Are you okay with speaking out?
Well, yeah, it's not about I told you so. You see, when I say to people, look, I said this and I wrote this 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and it's happening. I don't say that so that people say, oh, yeah, he's great, isn't he? Look what he said, and it's all been right. Ain't he good? I say it for a simple reason. If I could know it 25 years ago, and it's happening now, then that means there is a plan for the world, that the events are not random.
Right.
That's why I say things like that sometimes. It's to emphasize, look, if I could know that 25 years ago and it's happening now, it's obviously not happening by random chance. It's happening because it's meant to happen, that it's been manipulated to happen. This is, again, the example of Aldous Huxley and George Orwell. It's the same principle. How did they know all those decades and decades and decades ago that the world that we are experiencing now was going to happen? Because there is a plan. It's very, very important. It's fundamental that we understand that, because if there's a plan, it means that there's someone or something or some network manipulating that plan, deciding on that plan, and putting it covertly into place. And therefore, lots of dots begin to connect and dominoes start to fall once you realize that events are not random, but that the society transforming ones have been planned not just for 5 minutes or 5 years or even 50 years, but far longer even than that.
Is it getting easier to write the message? Is it getting easier to speak about it? Yes. I mean, you're talking to me now. When I started out in 1990, consciously on this journey of discovery, uncovering, and communicating, it was a very different world. No one wanted to know, really. Right.
I mean, my first trips around America in the 1990s. I mean, I was talking in people's front rooms, Jimmy.
Right.
In places like New England. I was talking to 8 people at an event near Chicago. I mean, really. And when I was invited to speak at these big expos, as they were then, these whole life expos,
right,
places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. I remember speaking at another one in Las Vegas. You were put on at the end of the night when everyone had gone home. All the Deepak Chopras and Wayne Dyers. They were in the prime time of the day, and they would have packed halls, and I would be on at the end of the day when people were sweeping up and preparing the breakfast tables for the next morning. And of course, you didn't speak to many people. But if you keep going, I mean, that was the hardest time, Jimmy, to be honest. I mean, it's a different thing now. It's coping with the interest. In those days, it was coping with the lack of interest.
I know, right?
And I'll tell you what, the lack of interest is far harder to deal with, because you wonder where it's going. You wonder if there's any point in what you're doing. I mean, you're traveling around, talking to people and paying for the privilege.
Right.
But if what you say has validity and you keep saying it and you won't stop saying it, and no matter what the pressures are to just go and do something else, then if it's got validity, it will be shown to be so eventually, and that's what's proving to be the turning point for me. And what I'm finding, this is why, in answer to the question, it is getting easier, is because as I've gone around the world in the last 18 months on this speaking tour, more and more people are opening their minds to question things they wouldn't question before. They're opening their minds to possibilities they wouldn't have even considered before. And it's not only numbers, it's the kind of people, it's system people I'm seeing. People you'd never think would have questioned anything, who are now questioning it. And it's been an interesting week for me, because this new book, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told, has come out. I've done a lot of interviews on the British media this week, on radio stations and what have you. Now, I remember the days in 1991, 92, when if I went on a radio station, then I would get ridiculed and laughed at, and that basically they would just dismiss me with a wave of the hand, and it would be a good laugh. I mean, it will give the audience a laugh. Let's talk to that David Icke bloke. What I found, even to my astonishment, doing these interviews this week, is how many of the presenters are absolutely into this information now. It's just been an incredible turnaround that we're seeing unfold. Obviously, it's not as big as we'd like it to be, but it's moving in that direction. And so there's much to be encouraged about, but also much to be mind-focused about, because of the speed in which this agenda is unfolding now in many areas, not least the key one. Two key ones. One is this transhumanist agenda to replace the human mind with artificial intelligence. But the other key one, and interestingly, both are fundamentally coming out of Silicon Valley, it's to hijack the flow of information, right. Not least algorithmically through Facebook, Google, YouTube, etc., to stop this information that's challenging the official narrative from circulating as it has done in the last few years, thanks to the internet.
I want to, before we move on, we have so much to cover tonight, and we'll run out of time like we always do. But I do want to point out one thing. I have, I have friends that were with you in the beginning that all share some pretty funny David Icke stories. He slept on my couch. We did this. We fed each other. And, it was so many years ago, but here we are today, and look at the message, and here we are. You're still friends. We don't have to name names here, but you're still friends with all of those that supported you over the years. And now you are able to ride this together today. And that's got to make you feel pretty good.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel really good for a lot of people, because in those early days, literally, I mean, staying in a hotel, you having a laugh. Right. It was a couch, it was a spare bedroom. It was, I mean, I've slept in a car more than once to save money on expenses while I was doing this. So yeah, there was a lot of people in those early days that were. That helped you out, and it didn't seem really to be going anywhere for a long time, but something inside you drives you on, and you do it anyway, and then the waters start to break, and it's been just an incredible journey, because it never you never would have thought it would have got to where it is now in some of the situations that I've found myself in, where absolutely no one wanted to know.
Right.
So it's good to see that a lot of people have been vindicated, and a lot of people's efforts are bearing fruit.
And there's I said to you in an email this week or last week, and I wasn't saying it in jest, and I know that you got my point. I want the audience to hear this out. When I said the book is fantastic, and you're absolutely right, and we've been speaking about this, and we're doing this together, and yes, but I really want you to be wrong, right? You know what I mean? We don't want you to be right here. You are, but you know what I mean? This is something that we want you to be wrong here.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying a few minutes ago.
Yes.
The idea is to eventually be wrong.
Right.
Wrong in the sense that what you say the plan for the world doesn't happen.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. I get no satisfaction whatsoever at seeing things that were in my books in the 90s being read on the television news today. No satisfaction whatsoever. It's like stick your chest out. See, I told you. Well, actually, I don't want to tell you.
Right.
I don't want it to happen. And I think, Jimmy, that's the era now we need to go into, and I am going to go into from here on, which is to focus on, okay, we have this situation. What are we really going to do about it? And the answers are not sitting around a table with someone taking minutes. They are a transformation of human perception, because it's the hijacking of human perception that has got us into this situation. It's everything. I mean, I emphasize this in the book, and from perception comes what you will do and won't do, support, not support, challenge, not challenge, accept, not accept. Mm-hmm. And therefore the battleground, for want of a term, on which the whole future of and direction of human society is being played out, is in the perceptions of the population. They don't have networks of control of all kinds of media, not least increasingly the internet giants, because it's a bit of fun. They have to do it because they cannot control 7.5 billion people physically. Not that there is any physical when you get deep into it, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Because there's not enough of them. I mean, the number of people in full knowledge of what they're doing and what the end goal is designed to be is a tiny fraction of the 7.5 billion. So they want to be able to, if you like, physically control by connecting the human mind to artificial intelligence. But until they do that, they can't. So they have to control perception. And that is how they've done it up to this point. And we have to take those perceptions back. And what's very encouraging is that more and more people are doing that by simply saying, hold on, I'm going to reassess my perception of everything and see if what I've thought up to this point and believed up to this point actually is valid and can be justified. And what happens when you go through that process, as you will know, and many people listening to this program will know, you find that they're not valid and they don't stand up to questioning, which is why, again, we have this pressure all the time, not just to delete freedom of speech in so many various ways, but also to stop people questioning anything. I mean, this whole political correctness nonsense is basically the population being manipulated to silence itself and not question anything. And, this needs to be challenged, as I do vehemently in the book.
Why did we're going to head to a break here, but I need your answer on this. When did we start to tap out? When did we start to give in on all of this? Because it was gradual, but there was a turning point, and suddenly we are completely numb now. It really feels that way, that it's just okay to allow this negativity and this manipulation by the media and what's going on in politics and in the military and corporations and Facebook and Google. It's like it's just okay. You know, I don't understand why we are such laydowns. Lemmings to the sea, David.
Well, if you go back a bit further, there was clearly, I talk about this in the book, there was clearly a fundamental change in the human psyche about 6,000 years ago, when humanity started, if you like, to process information in a different way to what it did before. But if you bring it closer to where we are, basically you have a system that has been structured so that many, many, many in the target population are playing a part every day in building their own prison and building their own perceptual prison, while having no idea that's what they're doing. You know, people working in corporations, not the people that run them, of course. I'm talking about people working them. People work in the banking system, people work in politics, people work in the media. They are together contributing to the incessant control of human perception every day without realizing that's what they're doing. And because there is a structure in place, a compartmentalized structure, which means the vast majority have no idea what they're actually part of, you have a system which is battering human perception every waking moment, probably beyond waking moments, using technology these days. Mm-hmm. And if you're not careful, what happens is you get battered into acquiescence. First of all, you get battered into giving your perceptions away through the process of everyone knows that. Well, no, everyone doesn't know that. Everyone has been told that. That's why people believe everyone knows that, because everyone's accepted the same narrative. But also, you know, if you get people who are kind of, if you like, resisting it, questioning it, a lot of them get battered into acquiescence and you know, walking away from it because of basically they just get tired of what they perceive to be banging their head against a wall. You see, we've just talked about this period of nearly 30 years that I've been doing this. I've seen so many people come and go. I've seen people come, I've seen them be flavor of the month for a while and then disappear, never to be heard of again.
Right.
See, I cannot comprehend that from my perspective, because once you know what's happening, once you know what's meant to happen, what the plan is, then how can anyone walk away and say, oh, it's the kitchen's too hot? You know, we'll turn the volume down then, but get on with it, you know. Because if we don't, then what you're accepting is what you perceive to be the plan is going to happen. I don't accept that. I will not accept that. And so you keep going. And when you meet challenges, you don't walk away and feel sorry for yourself. You up your game. And you find a way around it, and you become more determined, not less. So I've seen some people who've made this journey through this whole period, but I've seen so many people come and then disappear, and I would say to them, "What are you doing? Until this is sorted out, what are you doing? We've got to keep on and keep on and keep on and do everything necessary to make sure this nightmare that is planned does not happen." And that's only going to come from informing a population that's currently not informed about what they're part of and what's happening around them.
As a member of the media, I find the responsibility that is on my shoulders sometimes a little overwhelming. I speak to literally millions and millions of people each month, millions. And I'm wondering if the rest of the world is aware of the media infighting and stuff that we have going on here. And it's not only the news, it's commercials, it's everything else that happens here in the United States. Is it the same way over in the UK? And do you think that, and Europe, with the infighting and the sides that are taking the manipulation of the population. And do you think that the members of the media over there are going to step up and start to bear some responsibility the way that I feel that I have?
Well, I think some are. I mean, some of the presenters who have interviewed me this week on mainstream radio stations are clearly very sympathetic to this information and the fact that this is happening.
Right.
Their problem is, of course, and you'll know this very well with your experience, is that it's not easy to work. In fact, it's almost impossible to work in the mainstream media and not conform to the strict limitations to how far you can stray from what I call the postage stamp consensus of perceived normality. And it's also more difficult here because the government controls the radio frequencies much more fiercely than in some other countries. So it's not easy to get on a radio frequency to actually broadcast. So it's mainly done through the internet. So there are a number of people who are putting this information out in internet shows. And from my experience, only in the last week or so, there's a lot of very frustrated mainstream presenters who are in the mainstream stranglehold, would love to talk about this more widely, but of course there are limits to what they're allowed to say and at the same time keep their job.
I know. Listen, we got to head towards a break here, but this is. I am so aware of how far that I push this on Coast to Coast. We know how big Coast to Coast is, right? It's the number one overnight show, has been for 25 years. But I also, you have to be aware of who's listening out there. And I'm pushing it, and I'm just wondering when the red phone is going to ring, David, right? It's going to be one of those nights where, you know what, you just took it a little bit too far. But me, David, and I'm serious, I just don't care anymore. I don't care.
Neither do I, and I haven't cared for a very long time. In fact, when the symbolic red phone rings, it's time to punch the air because it means you're making a difference.
That's exactly right. Our guest tonight is David Icke, live from the UK. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You can follow David on Twitter at David Icke. We are talking about his new book, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Hello, Fadernauts. This is Jimmy Church, and I'm introducing New Pharma, a company whose products are based on science. Human function based on the endocannabinoid system, or ECS. New Pharma firmly believes in this science, and their research indicates that support of the ECS provides the beneficial effects for a healthy lifestyle. New Pharma's science includes relief capsules for pain relief, sleep capsules, which are natural support for occasional sleeplessness. Foundation is support for your ECS, and Fit capsules support your active lifestyle. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2B for a 33% discount on all of their products. Or visit newpharma.com for all of the knowledge on the science. That's GNUpharma.com. Go Beckley Tappy.
You're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
Yes.
We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
Ancient Life Oil. Life-changing. The real oil. CBD is truly ancient life oil from the source. This oil has no psychoactive effect and is also legal in all 50 states. When you're healthy, you're happy. The truth about this wonderful plant is that it wants to give back to mankind life, longevity, and happiness. Ancient Life Oil are golden grade, all organic, non-GMO, and infused with high-quality liquid coconut oil. It's simple. Just go to ancientlifeoil.com today. That's ancientlifeoil.com. The best, purest, organic, and non-GMO CBD in the world. Go Beckley Tappy. The statements made regarding these products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Please consult your healthcare professional about potential interactions or other possible complications before using any product.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, David Icke, and this segment of Fade to Black is proudly brought to you by Life Change Tea. Their super strength tea is where you need to start out. Let's go to the banners right now at jimmychurchradio.com. Use the promo code FADER, and you're going to get yourself a free shipping. Now, David, when we are talking, let me back up for a second. Your internet TV show that you did, I think it was called Connecting the Dots, or
yeah,
right. And back then, when you were talking about how you started to figure out the matrix and Wi-Fi signals and things, and the ability to project this, but it opened up my mind one night. I was like, man, David's right here. Hold on a second. And I went through all of that series of broadcasts, and I started to figure things out, and it was frightening. But then, now let's fast forward to earlier this year when Elon Musk literally said, check it out, man. I think it's ones and zeros. I think we're living in a binary world. This isn't real. This is a simulated thing now, it's one thing for you to say it and for me to understand. When Elon Musk says something like that, he is reaching to an audience that has never read David Icke or listened to Fade to Black or Coast to Coast. Do you understand what I'm saying? And boom, it suddenly validates things, and now people are listening to us that have been talking about this forever. When Elon said that, did you sit back and go, okay, it is real. I've been talking about it. But this is something that, coming from a guy that has tremendous influence in all circles.
Yeah, three things, really. First of all, I'm glad he said it because it opened up the conversation. But I do, as I say in the new book, I do question why someone like Elon Musk, for instance, can warn increasingly often about the dangers of the end of humanity as we know it, of connecting the human mind to AI, and then buys companies like Neuralink to do just that. I think that's a very strange contradiction. But of course, it's not just Elon Musk now. I came to these conclusions in the early 2000s, maybe about 2002, 2003, that actually when you put all the information together, that we do live in some kind of simulation. I mean, the very fact that the physics of our world and the laws and, if you like, physics of computer games are basically identical starts to give it away. The other area, of course, is that there's a big and gathering area of scientific research outside of mainstream science, which is known as the electric universe. And when you look at their findings and their discoveries and their explanations of how the universe works through electrical and electromagnetic fields and sources of communication, then again, you start to look at the whole simulation and what they're finding with the electromagnetic electrical structure, on one level anyway, of our reality is the very Wi-Fi field, what I call the cosmic internet, that I've been writing about all these years. And like I say, it's not just Elon Musk. I mean, we're now seeing more and more mainstream scientists who are coming out and saying, well, actually, it does look like we're in a simulation. There's a guy called Silas Bean who led a team that studied this at the University of Bonn. There's a guy called James Gates who was a scientific advisor to the Obama administration. And in the last year, a guy called Rich Terrell, who is a computer scientist at NASA, who has come out and said, he thinks we live in a holographic digital simulation, which is just the wording that I was using all those years ago. It's a digital holographic phenomenon. And of course, what comes from that is that digital holographic simulations and constructs do not just manifest naturally. There is some intelligence that's created it. So what is that intelligence? So once we start to go down this road of seeing that actually we're in some kind of construct, then other things come from that, which is, of course, well, who built it? So it's a fascinating time. I would just have some caution, however, and just say that we should always question why suddenly so many in the mainstream are coming out and saying we live in a simulation. I think there's very little question, if any, that we do live in a simulation. But why do they want us to look at this now in with more and more people coming out? And some will be genuine, but there is, of course, this agenda of artificial intelligence and connecting people to technology. And you know, we've got to watch the double bluff where they say, yeah, we do live in a simulation, so let's just make the best of it.
Right.
And this is the way to make the best of it. Connect to technology, which will allow you to get more out of the construct and such like. We have to be aware of that. But I'm glad it's coming out, because once you go down these roads, a lot of other preconceived ideas and preconceived perceptions of reality start to fall. These pillars of it's a solid world and everything's limited and what have you, they all fall. Because if we live in a simulation, we don't live in the world that we've been told throughout our lives we live in. In fact, we do not even live in a world. We live in an information source, which is operating within a certain very tiny band of frequency. And we are decoding that information source into the reality that we think we're experiencing outside of us. In fact, it only exists in the visual sense, in a few centimeters at the back of the brain, that decodes electrical information from the five senses into holographic digital information, I would say, which is the world we think is outside of us, but is actually inside of us. We live in an information source. We do not live in a world.
And let me be devil's advocate here for a second. And those that would say, well, what does that matter? What does it change in our world if that is the case? Our world is still our world. It's not going to. I still have to work tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we shouldn't live in the world and enjoy it. I do.
Right.
But to understand how we're creating it and how it manifests is to take our power back over it. See, I don't just bang on all the time about perception and taking control of perception just on the basis of and then you won't have your mind and beliefs manipulated in the way that they are.
Right.
Perception is fundamental to everything, because this is the way I see it. We we are living in this information source, which operates like a form of cosmic Wi-Fi. We can't see Wi-Fi, but we're aware it exists because we have computers that connect to Wi-Fi and take the information from Wi-Fi, which in the Wi-Fi sense is in a totally different, the information is in a totally different state to what it is when it appears on the screen. Why? Because the computer has taken the Wi-Fi information in the form that it takes there, and it's decoded it into the information we see on the screen in a very different form. What we're doing is taking information from cosmic Wi-Fi, this quantum field of possibility and probability, and we are decoding that into a very different form, which is the digital holographic reality that we experience as the world. Now, what possibilities and probabilities we take from that cosmic Wi-Fi field, just as the information that we go to and explore on the internet, people will go to these websites, someone will go to these websites, depends on perception. Even on that level, people's perceptions are dictating which websites they go to and which websites they don't go to.
That's right.
But in the cosmic sense, our perceptions manifest as a band of frequency. If you, for instance, see yourself in very limited terms, I'm just little me, I have no power, that perceptual state manifests as a very low and very narrow band of frequency, in a very low band of frequency. And therefore, you set up a feedback loop between your perceptions and this cosmic Wi-Fi field or fields. And so you will set up that feedback loop at the level, at the frequency band level of your perception. So if you see yourself in very limited terms, I have no power, nothing ever happens to me outside of the ordinary, what you're doing is creating a feedback loop. And what that feedback loop is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you are now interacting with the cosmic field of possibility and probability at the level of little me, I have no power. And therefore, that feedback loop will manifest, you will manifest by decoding that information into a holographic, quote, physical experience that will reflect your perception. So when you expand your mind and you expand your self-identity, which is the absolute key to everything, and you say, I'm not, Ethel on the checkout, I'm not Bill who drives a bus, I am infinite awareness, all that is, has been, and ever can be, having that experience. Well, now you are perceiving both yourself and reality in a much more expanded way. And that expanded perception of possibility and probability will then interact with the cosmic field of possibility and probability in a much more expanded and high frequency state. And therefore, what you will decode from that field as an experience, as a life, will dramatically change because you are manifesting possibilities and probabilities from a totally different level and from a totally or much more expanded range of possibility and probability. And this is why when people go through what we call waking up, what is waking up? It's just breaking through the onion skins of programming that isolate us in five sense reality. When they start to break up simply by questioning what we've believed up to this point and realizing it has no validity, so we only believe it through repetition, not through credibility, then that process starts in which you start to interact with the quantum fields in a much more expanded way. And what people then find is suddenly there's great synchronicity in their life there wasn't before. what's happened? Well, it's very simple. What has happened? The more the breadth and scale of the interaction you have with the quantum field, the more possibilities and probabilities you are potentially accessing, compared with little me, I have no power, that's actually accessing very little. And so you find that life changes, synchronicity starts, life starts to become an adventure instead of an ordeal. It becomes an I can instead of an I can't. And this is where we take our power back. But through this this means, this is one of the great problems that I see in what's called the alternative media, is that much of it may be alternative in the sense that it sees world events in either a slightly or very different way to the mainstream narrative, but it's still on the postage stamp. It's still on the postage stamp consensus about the way reality works. That's why it looks for answers within the 5 sense world of illusion, of physical illusion. This is why so much of it got behind Trump, because it's looking for answers in the world that the only world it believes exists, which is basically the 5 sense world. And so you get behind Trump because Trump's telling you what you want to hear. Of course, all politicians do that. And therefore he'll change it. Well, he's not going to change it. He's just a pawn of the same force that ironically the alternative media have been exposing all these years. We're not going to change the 5 sense world within the 5 sense world, because the 5 sense world's just a movie screen. It's just a reflection of a decoded reflection of information states and perceptual states. It's our perceptions we have to change. And if you bring it down to a basic level, we create collectively, individually and collectively, a feedback loop between ourselves via perception and this quantum field of possibility and probability. We basically demanifest that which is controlling us, or we demanifest its effect, because we no longer decode it into reality. The reason that human perceptions are so targeted, in fact, that's the bottom line foundation of all the manipulation, is because deep in the shadows, they know about this feedback loop, which is based on perception. If they can control our perception and limit them and squeeze them and give us a false little me identity, they know that through that they will be dictating our life experience through this feedback loop. This is where the answers lie. And that's why I'm far more encouraged and optimistic about turning this around. If you said to me, or it was the case, that we had to turn this around by people sitting around tables, someone taking minutes and stockpiling weapons and all this stuff, then forget it. It's over. But because of how reality works, we don't have to do that. In fact, it's the worst thing we can do, really, because once you set up the feedback loop with a transformation of perception, then things like organizations and happenings within the world of 5 senses, they naturally occur synchronistically from the fact that you're manifesting them from the realm of probability and possibility. This is where we need to go. This is where the answers lie. And through this process, if enough of us start to do this, and it is happening, then basically you can transform this world dramatically quickly, because the world that we experience is simply the sum total of human perception. Change perception, change the world. I've had some posters done. I think that they should be on everybody's wall, really, that say, change perception, change your life. Change perception, change the world. It's that simple. But of course, we have to believe that changing anything is complex and takes time, and you can't do everything at once. Well, you can if you change perception, because you manifest a different world to the perceptions that were manifesting the world before.
Well, they lost control of that feedback loop in the last 2 years. They had an easy go. When I say they, I'm talking about the media and who is pulling those strings in the background with the media and moving up the chain. But they had an easy go of it for the last 2,000 years. This last 2 years, they've lost control. And those that were questioning all of this now saw it play out right in front of them. And I'm certainly referring to fake news, and I'm referring to the manipulation of the media and how it is obviously an agenda that is being played out. But those out there that never bought into this were seeing it and now are questioning things, David.
Yeah, if I go back to 1990, when I went through a series of extraordinary, what people would call paranormal experiences. They're actually quite normal, but of course, postage stamp normal is so narrow and so defended and so firewalled that anything that happens outside of it has to be called paranormal, so they can give us the idea that it's not normal and therefore a bit strange and stay away from it. But I went through these paranormal experiences, and in those early months, really, I met a lot of psychics and stuff in those early months of 1990 who were telling me, I was presenting television programs at the time, and I was a national spokesman for the British Green Party and what have you. And they were telling me I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets, and basically all the stuff that's happened since I was told was going to come in early 1990 through these various psychics that I synchronistically met. I only set out to meet one. The rest just came into my life, quote, coincidentally.
Right.
And one of the common themes at that time was this. That they were telling me that whatever they were connecting to was asking them to tell me that there was a vibrational change coming, what I would now call a frequency informational change coming, that was going to wake humanity up from its coma, from its slumber. And this would, first of all, impact upon those that were more awake, and put another way, that were in a lesser state of density, energetically and perceptually. But eventually, even the most asleep were going to be affected by this. And they said that, and I was told that the other aspect of this vibrational change is that all that had been hidden from us was going to be brought to the surface where we could see it. And the first book I ever wrote after my if you like, perceptual transformation, I actually called Truth Vibrations, because that's the name I gave to this vibrational change on the basis of it was going to bring to the surface all that had been hidden. And of course, in 1990, when I was told this, and I was blinking into this whole new life that was starting to unfold before me then, there was no sign whatsoever, A, that anyone was waking up to question anything, and B, that all that had been hidden was going to be brought to the surface. But look, Jimmy, from the perspective of coming up to late 2017, which is what, 1990, 2017, those things are happening. More and more people are awakening and questioning. And my goodness, look at what we know now. We didn't know 5 years ago. Never mind what we knew or didn't know in 1990. So there is, people, we look at this manipulative force, and we need to understand what its game is. We need to understand what its goals are. We need to understand fundamentally how it works so that we can stop being hoaxed by it, by seeing through it. But let us not forget that this manipulative force in cosmic terms of infinite awareness, infinite possibility, is a fly on an elephant's back. and that which wishes to rebalance this reality and awaken humanity from its manipulated coma is at work, and it's at work all around us. And I think it's been working through me since 1990. That's what I was told was going to happen, and my life has taken that road. And that's not to say look at me, I'm the savior. No, the point is, this force, this what Wakantanka, what the Lakota call the force that moves all things, infinite awareness, of which we are all a point of attention, within which we're all a point of attention, can work through anybody. It's letting it in that's the key. Ethel on the checkout who says, "Oh, well, I've got no power." Open your mind to it, let it in, and your life will transform. And what defends the defense mechanism to letting that in from the system's point of view is that if you say anything or do anything outside of the postage stamp normal, then those that have accepted postage stamp normal, which is still the vast majority, will actually give you a hard time. They'll laugh at you, they'll ridicule you, they'll dismiss you, they'll call you dangerous. And people, through this fear of what other people think, which is the prison that most people live in, then resist going down this road of letting this true self in, because once you let it in, you don't act postage stamp normal. You don't say things from that perspective. You don't live your life from that perspective, and thus part of the journey of awakening is to have people around you, even your family, friends, or whatever, say, Bill's gone crazy. He's gone mad. What's going on? You're talking nonsense, mate. What are you talking about? And if you're not prepared to go through that, then forget about awakening, because awakening is to change perception from postage stamp normal, and in a process of constant further expansion, doesn't stop. You expand, never stops. Then you're going to act differently, and you're going to be perceived differently. But remember, different is not another word for madness. Different is a word meaning different. And my goodness me, if we are going to change a world that's based on uniformity, then that change must take place through the process of expressing and celebrating our diversity and our uniqueness.
We got to take a break right here. Our guest tonight is David Icke, live from the UK. When we come back, now we're talking about connecting the dots, and we're going to do just that. We're going to we got to get to the singularity. We got to go AI, AR, and the Matrix, and what's going on right now. We'll be right back. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Hurricanes, earthquakes, wildfires. This year we've experienced more than our fair share. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. And last month I decided to make sure my family does not have to worry about food should we get caught in a real emergency situation. Introducing Numana, a healthy, storable product that tastes so good that you'll want to eat it every day instead of just during those times of duress. All Numana products have a 25-year shelf life, are MSG and GMO-free, no preservatives, and are made in America. With the Numana pack in your home, you'll be able to sleep at night knowing that you've protected your family. Not only have I tasted and tested, I own it. Now you can too. Just click on the Numanna banner on jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code Jimmy when you order. In addition to a discount, we'll send you an autographed Fade to Black t-shirt. Seriously, go Beckley Tappy.
Do you worry a lot? Whether you're a college student, busy professional, parent, or grandparent, ongoing stress and elevated levels of the stress hormone cortisol can rob your memory, your health, and your future. Now you can combat the effects of stress and anxiety while improving your memory and recall at the same time with the dietary supplement Calm and Clever. Studies show that the ingredients in Calm and Clever reduce cortisol by as much as 30% in 1 to 2 weeks. Call 1-800-758-8746 or calmandclever.com.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
Hi, folks. CBD is the home run hitter for health right now. Why, you ask? Because of what it does for the body. Unfortunately, I can't tell you all about the benefit. You know, there's reasons. Do your due diligence and log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com. Ancient Life Oil uses organic ingredients and is blended in coconut oil for some of the best benefits. Legal in 50 states and non-psychoactive. Log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, David Icke. This segment of Fade to Black is proudly brought to you by River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Use your promo code F2B blend. Get 15% off of your order today. And David, hey, that's pretty cool, David. We have our own coffee. That means you've arrived. When are we going to have the David Icke blend?
No time soon, Jimmy.
Now, this is talk about an artificial reality. That us having our own coffee is it's certainly proof of that. But when and I keep stealing your reference of connecting the dots, but you do it so well in the new book, and I stress with everybody, go and get everything you need to know, and the links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. Go and get the book, but when we are connecting the dots here and we go through this idea of a matrix and a holographic universe and ones and zeros and a binary existence and feedback loops, when we swing this thing around to the singularity and artificial intelligence and what Google and Facebook and DARPA and Sandia National Labs, their focus is just that, to get to this point. And when we do, immortality comes into play. There's a lot of things that they are going to suggest, but it will be the machines at that point, whether you like it or not, that will retain control. And you connect the dots here perfectly in the book, and I need you to expand on that.
Well, they'll have many selling points. There already are many selling points to connect the human mind to artificial intelligence. People like Ray Kurzweil, the Google executive who is the PR man for Frankenstein, and others are talking about the fact that it will make us superhuman. The idea is to make us subhuman and to make us no longer human, but just to become an AI human, which is the equivalent of being a computer terminal on someone else's internet, with no human thought or emotion left. That's where we're going, and the timescales they're talking about are not forever and a day. Kurzweil's talking about this starting by 2030. And this whole massive operation of getting particularly young people, but others too, addicted to technology and addicted to phones and addicted to technology they wear, leading to the addiction reaching the point where they accept technology inside the body, which is now happening. I mean, I spoke in Sweden earlier this year, and there's people there having parties, microchipping parties, where they get chipped. I mean, straight out of my books from about 1994, that is, that this was the plan. And so it's been a process. I mean, maybe I should just go through that quickly. There is definitely a period around, in our perception of time, that's another illusion, about 6,000 years ago, when there was a massive change of psyche. And it happened in a period that was far beyond what you would call a natural evolutionary chance. And there was a book came out some years ago by a British academic called Steve Taylor, called The Fall, where he's basically focusing on this period of 6,000 years ago when this psyche change took place. And he points out that before then, which is in another time measurement, 4,000 BC, there was no war as we know it. There was no patriarchal society as we know it. There was no massive inequality as we know it. There was no class system as we know it. And there was no organized religion as we know it. And this change took place after violent invasions of the Middle East by what is called Indo-European and Semitic peoples. And interestingly, because this world is a complete inversion, you have to turn everything on its head to get anywhere near the truth. If I say Semitic peoples, people would say, "Oh, you mean Jewish people?" Well, actually, Semitic doesn't mean that, as we're told it does. Semitic refers to a series of a language group in the Middle East, the overwhelming vast majority of which are Arabic languages, ironically. Someone called Rian Eisler, who's a cultural historian, is quoted in the book as saying that this change of psyche about 6,000 years ago, she calls it the Great Change, a change so great indeed that nothing in all we know of human cultural evolution is comparable in magnitude. Now, this psyche change, I say, was when human society, human perception, therefore human society, started to be hijacked in a very big way. And the process has gone on and gone on and gone on. And it's always been leading to where we are now, which is to so control the human psyche that basically humanity becomes assimilated into this AI mind. And, I keep hearing AI everywhere. Of course I do. It is everywhere. AI this, AI that, AI is going to run this, AI that. My question has been, what is AI? What is AI? And I've quoted some people in the book who work with AI, and there's that, some of them are saying we don't really understand it. We don't really understand what it is. Well, what are you letting it take the world over for? Do you know there was a story this week of an AI creating an AI, an AI technology, and the AI technology it created is more advanced than the AI technology created by humans. So, what is this AI? And of course, in the book, I talk about this force, this distorted state of awareness, which is what it is in its prime form. But it does take form through various human and non-human forms, and that it has been manipulating human society. The ancient societies talked about it and had different names for it all over the world. This is the manipulative force that is directing the world into where it's going now. And it wants to assimilate all its targets into its state of awareness. So basically, they become it. It absorbs them into its psyche. And the way that it has controlled human perception up to this point and pushed us in this direction over the last 6,000 years is through controlling information. Of course, religion was a major way that it controlled human perception and imposed a perception on people. But there are limits to that. There are limits to that because it is still possible, despite that onslaught of perceptual programming, not to take it on, not to be affected by it, or at least totally affected by it. So that there is a way through expanded awareness of overriding the program, the perceptual program. So where it's been leading is where we are demonstrably going now, which is to, instead of manipulating perception as they've done up to this point, they become that perception through AI, by connecting the human brain to AI. And, Jimmy, when you've got people like Ray Kurzweil, who I wouldn't trust to tell me the time in a room full of clocks, frankly, that from around 2030, the human brain mind will be connected to AI, which will then do more and more of human thinking until eventually there is no human thinking left and it's all AI. When they're actually putting that in your face and saying it's a good thing, then you can see where this is going, because, of course, he's a Google executive. Google is an absolute monster. It's not only a search engine, it's one of the fundamental drivers with DARPA in the background, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, that is driving this AI transhumanist agenda. Facebook is a monster. It's not just a social media platform. It too is fundamentally involved in this transhumanist agenda. And so the idea is to lock people into AI, and then they become AI, and humanity as we've known it is no more. Now, again, people like Elon Musk and the scientist Stephen Hawking and increasingly others are actually warning about this and saying, that there are dangers. Now, I have my reservations about Elon Musk, as I've said, but they're warning about these dangers. But what they say is, we're going down a road and it's very dangerous. What they need to understand, I think Elon Musk will, actually, not so much Stephen Hawking, is that this is the road we're being taken down. We're not going down, we're not sleepwalking into it.
Right.
The human race is sleepwalking into it, but the people driving it aren't. The people driving it are trying to make it happen. They want us to, for there to be no humanity left as we know it. And what is humanity? It's a state of perception, a state of awareness. And that's where we've been driven. Now, if you then go deeper into this, and you realize that this information source that we decode into a holographic digital reality is operating within a band of frequency that's so narrow, it's a joke. And I say that this band of frequency that we can actually see visually or decode, if you go deeper into it, is as narrow and ludicrously narrow as it is on purpose. I say that the human genetics, this is talked about, of course, in all the ancient societies, has been manipulated so that we decode reality in a narrow band of frequency that will firewall us off from the greater infinite reality, and therefore isolate our perceptions in little me and the illusions of reality that we are given. And all this genetic manipulation, where people talk about the sons of God who interbred with the daughters of men, and all these symbolic stories you find not just biblically but all around the world in the ancient societies, they are describing this change, this great change in the human psyche, which is what? It was a change in the way humanity decoded and processed information. Thus, their perceptions changed. And we became the humanity that we've been in the last 6,000 years. So mainstream science says that the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what exists in the universe. Some say it's a bit more, but not much. So that's ridiculous. The electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what exists in the universe. And yet visible light, as scientists call it, which is the only frequency band that we can see and decode into a perceived visual reality, is a tiny fraction of the 0.005%. That's how ludicrous it is. That's how narrow it is. So we are decoding an information source in a certain frequency band. That force, which is manipulating this reality and has created the simulation to manipulate this reality, operates in its prime form, in its perceptual form, in its consciousness form, outside of this reality. And thus, it's working on, and not only in its consciousness form, in many other kinds of forms that we call extraterrestrials or, quote, aliens. They are operating outside of our frequency band. Therefore, they're operating outside of our perceptions of technological limitation. They're operating outside of our perceptions of everything. They have a completely different timeline.
Yeah, our vision, they're operating outside of everything if the frequency is off.
So where I'm going with this, Jimmy, is, to control humanity in the way that they are planning to and are in the process of doing, they need technology. They need advanced and ever more advanced technology. Otherwise, it can't be done. What they want to do could not be done in the pre-computer world, for instance. Couldn't be done. So now we've got to ask this question. Are we really saying that this force, in all its manifestations, human manipulators, non-human manipulators, are sitting around a table constantly, tapping their fingers, just waiting for some geek in a garage to somehow discover the next level of technology that will allow this whole control system to move on to its planned goal? Are we really believing that? Hey, some guy in a garage has just invented just what we need. Hey, what a stroke of luck. We can move on now. No. The technology that is now being introduced into human society to control us and build this technological control system, this technological sub-reality, was known to the force that's behind it when humans were knocking rocks together and firing bows and arrows and shooting muskets in breaches.
Right.
What's happening is it's being introduced. And, of course, if you're introducing something in the way that I'm describing, you need cover stories. Because if you haven't got cover stories, then people are going to see what's happening. And so the cover stories, this is not the case in every case, but in the vast, great society transforming technology cases, this is being just put into human society by this non-human force from outside in a sequence that's moving on this control system faster and faster and faster. I mean, why would DARPA and the CIA, etc., be seed funding Google before it became known as Google? Why was it seed funding the technology? Why was DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, seed funding the technology that we now call office assistants, which are basically fusing more and more the human mind and human interaction with AI? That's what it's all about. When you've got something in your house and you're talking to it like a human, whatever, Alexa, whatever they call it, Echo, different names, Siri.
Right.
Play this record for me. Tell me this. What about that? What they're doing is they are fusing the human psyche with AI on that perceptual interaction level. That's what's happening. It's the same with all the smartphones and stuff, with so many young people addicted to them. This fusion is taking place, and the idea is to push people along to the point where they will accept having their minds connected to AI technologically, and then that will be the end of it. And so when I said earlier, I have this passion, and I get up in the morning and I work till I drop, it's because there is this window of opportunity, which is not going to be very long, of what is happening becoming more and more blatant, so people actually focus attention on it, and this goal of connecting humans to AI so that everything is shut down and no one will ever question anything again, because the only questions they'll ever have will be AI generated anyway.
Yeah, and we talk about the last 6,000 years and how we got to here and accumulated knowledge and technology and invention and science and all of that. Great. But the AI engine, David, and you point this out in the book somewhat, once it starts to correct itself and write its own code, at that very moment, to me, that's the turning point. And they would be able to get smarter exponentially in nanoseconds. In other words, what took us 6,000 years to get here, they're going to be able to do that in about 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And it's happening, Jimmy.
Yes.
It's happening. I think it was Facebook had a AI program.
Yes, they did. Still do.
Where AI developed its own language that the humans didn't understand and was communicating with itself through this AI language that it had created. And the people running the study had no idea what the language meant or what was being communicated, and they shut it down.
It argued with itself, David. That was the crazy thing about that. It did exactly what humans do. It started to get angry. Right.
Yeah, and the thing is, that AI has learned things like how to drive a car by doing nothing but observe how humans drive a car. We're not. You're right. We're not talking about something that is going to move on slowly. It's something that is moving incredibly fast. Now, what is AI? As I say in the book, I would make two distinctions of what AI is. One I would call algorithmic AI, which is what people think they're dealing with, although even that, as you've indicated, is learning so fast that the speed of expansion is incredible. But I say there's another level of AI, and I call that archontic AI. And I use the word archontic because in 1945, a sealed earthen jar was found at a place called Nagamadi, about 75, 80 miles north of Luxor on the Nile in Egypt. And it was found to contain a treasure trove of incredible writing by a people, not a race, a belief system, a people known as Gnostics, which manifested in various ways. They ran the great library at Alexandria, which was that great depository of ancient knowledge, which the Roman Church destroyed. They were also the psyche behind the Cathars, who were, again, destroyed in southern France by the Roman Church, because they had a completely different view of the human condition. They talked about the creative force, which is what I call infinite awareness. But they also talked about a, quote, fake God, which had created a fake reality. And this fake reality was what humans were living. And as I point out in the book, if you take the symbolic language they were using to describe this fake reality, and of course, what they had to do, and these writings are estimated to have been hidden maybe around 400 AD, which would fit with the 415 AD, approximate period of one of the major destructions of the Great Library of Alexandria, then they had to communicate with people using the symbolic language that the people of that period would understand. This is where things like descriptions of what I call infinite awareness became the Father, the creative force, that which looks over everything. But if you bring that symbolic language through, as I do in the book, to present time, then what they were describing was the simulation. That's what they were describing. And they used the term archon or archons for this force that was manipulating human society and created what I call the simulation. And archons is a word meaning rulers, because they said that these archons, rulers, were the hidden rulers of humanity. And when you look at how the Gnostics describe the archons, you're looking at how the pre-Islamic and Islamic world described the jinn, entities in the human unseen, which is almost everything that exists, the human unseen, that were manipulating human society. And so I'm saying that actually the real AI and the AI that we are building a technological vehicle to take over human society is archontic AI, ultimately, this very force that's been manipulating human society all this time, excuse me. And so the vast majority of scientists working with AI will have no idea of any of this. This is why I say that so many of them are completely confused, bewildered, and mesmerized by this even algorithmic AI that's learning so fast and doing things that they don't really understand what's going on. They're losing control of Frankenstein. That's what's happening. But of course, deep in the shadows, Frankenstein himself, i.e. this force, is absolutely in control of Frankenstein. It's just the human society that's losing control of it.
And that is the crazy part about all of this, David. That's the Pandora's box. We think we have control. And at that point, AI knows that we are thinking that in advance. They will be able to circumvent and do the workaround on anything that we would try to do to slow it down. They will have outsmarted us. And that's the part that I don't think most people, they grasp, that idea. You want to build in an off switch? AI's thought of that already. Right?
Yeah, well, and the point to stress here is that this point that you've just described is not sometime never over the rainbow. It's happening now.
That's exactly the point.
Absolutely happening now. And if we don't get an understanding of this, it will be too late before we realize that there is a problem in the first place. And so all these diversions, you see, like all the basically the perceptual and sometimes literally civil war between the anti-Trump people in America and the pro-Trump people is a complete and absolute diversion of attention from where all eyes should be focusing on, and that's Silicon Valley and DARPA, because it's DARPA ultimately in the human world anyway, that is driving this agenda. Why would the technological arm of the Pentagon be driving this agenda? Because it likes humanity, because it funded these office assistant technologies, because it would like humanity to have an office assistant. I mean, what's going on? Of course it's not. The DARPA is just about the most sinister organization on earth, Monsanto included, by the way.
Oh, man.
And therefore, if it wants it, it's real bad for humanity.
Let's take a break right here, David. When we come back, now that we've scared the crap out of everybody, David, let's talk solutions. How's that?
Okay.
Our guest tonight, David Icke, live from the UK. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
This is KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station. Salt Lake City, Utah. Van Buren, Arkansas.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat.
Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now for a special radio offer from Angioprim. That's angioprim.com/radio. ANGIOPRIM. Angioprim.com/radio or call 877-882-7221. That's 877-882-7221.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRARadio.com.
Hello, Fadernauts. This is Jimmy Church, and I'm introducing New Pharma, a company whose products are based on science. Human function based on the endocannabinoid system, or ECS. New Pharma firmly believes in this science, and their research indicates that support of the ECS provides the beneficial effects for a healthy lifestyle. New Pharma's science includes relief capsules for pain relief, sleep capsules, which are natural support for occasional sleeplessness. Foundation is support for your ECS, and Fit capsules support your active lifestyle. Just click on the banner at JimmyChurchRadio.com and use the promo code F2B for a 33% discount on all of their products. Or visit newpharma.com for all of the knowledge on the science. That's GNUpharma.com. Go Beckley Tappy. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, David Icke. We're talking about his new book, Everything You Need to Know, but have never been told. He is live with us from the UK, and this segment of Fade to Black is proudly brought to you by New Pharma, GNU Pharma. Just click on their banner over at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Go to the site and read about the science behind New Pharma, natural solutions to health and wellness. Use the promo code F2B. You're going to get 33% off of your order. Now, David, I think about, when I think about solutions, and I go back to your your 10-hour marathon that I proudly sat front and center in the front row, as you remember, last year in Los Angeles. And you did 6 hours of waking up the audience to the reality of their own lives and those around them. But then you did 2 solid hours of solutions. And in the end, everybody was not only so uplifted and the standing ovation, but that's what they needed. It's one thing to wake everybody up, but then you've got to get to the point of what we can do about it. So here we are with all of this. How do we start to fix this machine? How do we turn this ship around?
Well, there's part of it is understanding the problem. There are people who call themselves spiritual and say we must let go of fear, who then say you can't talk about this and the sort of things we've been talking about tonight because you'll frighten people. Well, they'll be a lot more frightened. What I was going to say, they'll be a lot more frightened when they're connected to AI, but they won't even know anything when they're connected to AI that AI doesn't tell them anyway. But the situation that we'll face if we do nothing is far, far worse than actually facing it now. So understanding the problem is fundamental to appreciating the solution, which is why when I look at my life, in the 1990s, information was coming to me in this incredibly synchronistic way, which was, first of all, talking about the names, dates, places, 5 sense level of it, banking manipulation, political manipulation, manipulated wars. Then from the mid-90s onwards, it was added to by the fact that there's a non-human force behind this. That was followed by an understanding of the illusory nature and of reality. And then that was followed by the fact that it's a simulation that we're dealing with. And the key one in that sequence is understanding the illusory nature of reality. Because if we don't do that, then we continue to believe that everything is physical and everything is solid, and therefore everything is limited, and everything takes a long time, and we have no power, and you can't change it, or at least change it with any speed. And therefore people just accept things because there's nothing they can do about it. So understanding reality and the nature of who we are, and the fact that we are a state of awareness interacting with this world through the body. And we can take a perceptual state of 5 sense self-identity, which is limited, which is I can't, which is there's nothing we can be done to be done, so let's just accept it and be acquiescent. And then there's I am infinite awareness having that experience, and therefore I am infinite awareness. I can control that experience. There's no such thing as limitation. There's no such thing as I can't. And that completely changes the game. It changes the game for, if you like, an individual point of attention. It changes the game in their life and the way their life unfolds. But collectively, it changes the game in the world that we are living in. You know, religion's greatest contribution to this conspiracy of control is to create a personified God, a dictatorial God, often, that's controlling everything, and that we are just subordinate to that God. That God, in that context, is this manipulative force. In fact, those Gnostic writings said that the God of the Old Testament that's described, the one that wanted death, destruction, and mass murder, was this archontic force, and it makes absolute sense that they should say that. So the whole, and then as that began to fade in terms of its control of people, that religious perceptual prison, then they brought in mainstream science, and mainstream science has come for most of its existence from which direction? That we live in a solid mechanical universe where everything is apart from everything else, and we are just cosmic accidents, and Basically you're born, you live for a while, and then you die, and then all the lights go out. So in so many ways, people have perceived mainstream science and religion to be opposites and forces opposing each other, when they're different expressions of the same perceptual imprisonment to keep us from understanding the nature of who we really are, which is awareness, a state of awareness. And like I said earlier, we can interact with possibility and probability in a narrow band, i.e. a controlled state of impotence, or we can do it from an expanded band of potentially infinite potential of creativity and changing things. And we need to change it at that level. If you are trying to change a movie, you don't just stand on the stage and start screaming at the screen, telling it to change. It's a done deal by the time it's done that. And by the time we are experiencing this in an apparent physical experience, it's a done deal. The information from which this reality is created has already been decoded in that few centimeters at the back of the brain by the time we actually, quote, physically experience it. No changing it then. And they're quite happy that we perceive that we can change things in the world of the scene. We can't. Just like you can't change a movie when it hits the screen. You've got to go back and change the real. You've got to change what's being projected. And that is basically, in collective human society, it's the sum total of human perception. That has to change, and everything changes. That doesn't change, nothing changes. This is, I would suggest, is where this whole nightmare can be transformed. Because one of the things that's happening is people will have noticed that in recent times, actually more than recent times, really, going back quite a few years now, there have been this stream of movies and television programs that have actually depicted the very world that I've been describing tonight. Why? Because the world that we are being led into is so fantastically different to the world that we've known up to this point, that there's obviously a potential resistance where people go, hold on a minute, what is happening here? Look at what's happening in the world. Look how it's changing. What's happening? So what they're doing, it's called perceptual programming that is about preparing the psyche, the perceptions, the subconscious, to become familiar with this dystopian society I'm describing, so that as it comes in literally, it's not so alien anymore because the subconscious has been prepared to it. It's called preemptive programming.
Right.
And again, our psyche is being prepared to accept it. This is what's going on. So what are we coming back to all the time? The way that this is being introduced is by manipulating our perceptions and controlling our perceptions. So the way to stop it being introduced and to, if you like, decode into reality a completely different world is to take control of those perceptions back. And key to that is redefining self-identity. We've got to stop self-identifying with the experience, what I call phantom self, and start identifying with the true I, which is infinite awareness, all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience. And once you do that, then divide and rule fault lines like race, racism, and religion, and income bracket, and all these fault lines that divide and rule us, they all go because they're meaningless now. And I do what I'm seeing. And it's so blatant when I look at it, is all this political correctness and this LGB, and I mean, there's 26 letters in the alphabet. I'm sure God knows how many letters there'll be eventually describing the minutiae of sexual preference and identity and what have you. What is that doing? It's subdividing our self-identity into smaller and smaller minutiae of perceptions. No longer are we just human. We are male or female. And then we subdivide that, and we subdivide that, and we subdivide that. So when they're bringing in all this political correctness about transgender and all the rest of it, it's not what they claim. What they claim is that it's about stopping discrimination. Well, I'm all for that. I mean, discrimination against anything is outrageous, or anyone is outrageous. But that's not what it's really about. That's just the excuse. It's encouraging people to self-identify in smaller and smaller segments of self-identity. That they now have to have endless bloody letters to describe it. And the further you subdivide your self-identity into smaller and smaller minutiae of parts, the further your perceptions and your self-identity moves from its true self, which is infinite awareness. And it's sad for me and a real head shaker that the so-called progressive mentality, as it's called, which is actually not liberal. I mean, I would identify with being liberal in the dictionary definition sense, not the political sense, of being in favor of maximum freedom of expression, maximum freedom of lifestyle. I have a simple philosophy: do what you like so long as you don't impose it on anyone else. It's when you start imposing on people that don't want it imposed upon them, and I get interested. If everyone wants to do it, well, be my guest. Just don't impose it on anyone else. So I'm kind of extremely liberal, if you like, from that point of view. But this progressive mentality is not liberal. It's anti-liberal. It's trying to destroy freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And it's trying to tell people what they can and cannot say. And it's all part of this process of dividing and ruling humanity into smaller and smaller units. And what's kind of interesting, if we're talking about a simulation, is that there are many, and of course in the whole New Age arena, etc., this has been talked about for a long time, that there are mathematical codes like pi and Fibonacci and mathematical sequences that have been found and can be seen throughout the whole of human society, from the proportions of the human face to even down to the way hurricanes manifest. That there are certain mathematical and geometrical sequences that recur and recur and recur. I say they are there and constantly recurring because they are computer codes of the simulation. But there's another area of mathematical repetition in the fabric of our reality called fractal patterns. And fractal patterns are patterns that subdivide basically from the main pattern into smaller versions of the pattern. So each smaller version is basically a smaller version of the big pattern, and that's classically the way holographic and holograms operate. Every part of a hologram is a smaller version of the whole. But what's interesting, Jimmy, is they're not just finding these fractal patterns in everywhere in our reality, even down to the way rivers break up into other rivers and other streams. All over you see these fractal patterns. They're also seeing these fractal patterns even operating within human relationships and the way we operate emotionally. Now, where I'm going with this is, if you look at the history of human society, religion is a classic example. You start out with the main patterns. Let's take Christianity. You start out with the main pattern. Then it starts to break up into smaller versions of the same pattern called different names. So you break up into Protestant Christianity and Catholic Christianity. You have Islam, and then you break up into Shia Christianity and into Shia Muslim and into Sunni Muslim, and this pattern of a main pattern then breaking up into smaller patterns. This is fractal patterns. And what we're seeing now is exactly this process happening with self-identity. You start off with human, and then it becomes male and female. The patterns are replicated, And now they're being broken up into smaller patterns and smaller patterns. And it's basically a fractal self-identity in which people's perception is moving into smaller and smaller versions of these patterns to such an extent that you have all these letters now, LGB and goodness knows what. There was one the other day. It went on forever. And they are describing smaller and smaller perceptions of self-identity, and it's going into the opposite direction that we need to go to have a solution to this, which is moving out of the minutiae of self-identity, eventually even moving out of the self-identity of being human, which is just an experience, into the self-identity of the infinite self. And everything changes.
Well, David,
this is what happened to me, just very quickly, Jimmy. When this journey started for me,
right?
I changed my self-identity, and everything changed.
I remember that. I remember that. I remember that. This is the thing, though. We may be talking about the gay and lesbian and trans, but it's everywhere in society, David. Sports fans are being broken down, into segments on one side of the team, or Republicans and Democrats. Look how, there's subdomains now for every aspect of existence. And you see it in the UK. If you brought up all of the world's religions, all demographics, every aspect of it is being broken down to the point where you have subgroups on the same side fighting amongst themselves. And
exactly. Do you know, Jimmy? A few weeks ago, we had a transgender lady and a feminist lady having a punch up in the street.
Exactly. How did we get here? How did we get it? And here in the United States right now, for everybody to see, we now have this racism agenda being fought about when we had made strides away from that, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And these wounds, and we're being taken back now in time, and we're having racism discussed in the streets. And now I just don't get it. It's such an effective agenda. Just break it down, get the subgroups going, and the next thing you know, you have dissension amongst the troops on all segments of society.
Yeah, well, the thing is that if there's a few of you, and in, like I said earlier, in full knowledge of what they're doing, we're talking, compared with the human population, a tiny number of people. Then you have to set the target population at war with itself. And through that, you divide and rule them. So they're so focused on fighting each other that you are manipulating them all. You're holding the strings of all of them.
Right.
Without them even realizing there is any strings or there is any you. Like I mentioned earlier, the example of this focus in the United States, indeed wider, of anti-Trump and pro-Trump. That focus is taking people's focus away from Silicon Valley and this wider picture. And the more that you can subdivide human self-identity into smaller and smaller parts, the more potential there is, because the more parts you have now, to have divide and rule and conflict between different people. And what you're having in this whole political correctness agenda is the smaller the minority, because there is a political correct hierarchy, where the smaller the minority, the more power and higher they are in the agenda. So what happens, of course, is, first of all, there was a feminist movement, which was a response. It was manipulated by the Rockefellers, actually, but the people that went with it were understandably responding against the imbalance of power and influence between men and women. And then you start breaking men and women down. And I'm not attacking anyone's sexual preference. I mean, it's none of my business. Do what you like, or, as long as you don't force it on anyone else. All the best, mate. It's none of my business. Just don't make it my business. But you are. That's the problem. And then you break down into transgender, and you break down and you break down. And now you've got all these different hierarchies, and each new hierarchy, which is a smaller minority than the previous hierarchy, basically goes to the top of the pyramid of political correctness, hierarchical power. So the current, well, I mean, the extreme ultra-Zionism is always at the top because they're so well organized. But if you just put them aside for now, at the top at the moment, it seems to me, is transgender. That's the new, untouchable. But there's a reason why this transgender whole thing is happening, and I talk about it, of course, in the book. Because I have a simple phrase I've used so many times. When something comes out of nowhere and is suddenly everywhere, it's the agenda. Someone's pressed a button on the next stage.
Right.
And when you look into the agenda for the human body as part of this AI transhumanism connection, then they are in the process now, and it's being openly talked about, of creating a synthetic human form, which will not be male or female and will have no gender or ability to procreate. And as Aldous Huxley described in Brave New World in 1932, that humans will be procreated or created through technological laboratory means in what he called world hatcheries, and they'll be created in genetic castes like worker ants, etc., to do specific roles in society. This is where these mad people want to take us. And what we are being prepared for, and particularly the young are being prepared for, is the end of gender on the road to no gender. And, I quoted a guy in Phantom Self, my last book, called Dr. Richard Day, who was a Rockefeller insider. He was an executive of Planned Parenthood. And he addressed a meeting of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1969. And he shocked them by asking them to turn off recording equipment and not take notes, because he was going to tell them how the world was going to change, because the network he represented was going to change it.
Right.
And one of the things he said, and if people read Phantom Self, my last book, where I quoted him at length, they will be stunned at what he said in 1969, because one of the doctors did take notes and later reported what he said.
Right.
What he said in 69 compared with what is happening now. And one of the things, Jimmy, that he said in his list of this is how the world's going to change decades and decades and decades ago was, we're going to make boys and girls the same. And that's what this transgender explosion is all about. It's not about stopping discrimination. I'm all for that. It's about confusing people, children particularly, about their gender who wouldn't otherwise have been confused and weren't confused before. It's all part of this movement to this no gender synthetic human.
That is, it's an unbelievable thing to think about. But the point is very simple. In an artificial reality, AI, AR world, you don't need to have sex. The machines are going to create themselves. Robots building robots.
Yep.
Right?
That's exactly what's happening already.
Exactly. David, how did you get so smart? Now, I've asked you that before. Thank you so much. And when am I going to see you again?
That's a good name for a song, Jimmy, isn't it?
Yeah.
When will I see you? I've ended a world tour over 18 months now of all-day events, which ended in the Netherlands about 3 weeks ago. But from the spring, I'm starting another world tour of evening events, which means that I can get to more cities in a week. I can do 3 in a week instead of 1.
Right.
And I'm starting in Britain and then going into Europe, and then we're coming into North America. So it will be then, Jimmy. And what I'm doing with these evening events is I'm focusing on you might say solutions and focusing on this whole area of perception and how we take control of them back. So I'm looking forward to it, because that's the next stage for me. That's where we need to go. Okay, we kind of understand the problem. What do we do about it? And that's what these evening events are going to be about.
And hopefully this time we can break bread. All right.
Yeah. Well, of course, it means I'm going to be doing several cities in the same country, so there'll be more time to have a breather between them.
Yeah, absolutely. And be safe out there, okay? I can't wait to get you back on, and so much to think about, David. And I know you've got a whole day ahead of you. Normally I would be a little selfish and say let's keep going here, but you've got a full day and schedule in front of you. I'm going to thank you for taking the time right now to spend with not only myself but our audience. Thank you so much, David.
It's been a real pleasure, Jimmy. Even at 3:30 in the morning, it's been a real pleasure. I always enjoy talking to you, mate.
You're the best, David. Thank you so much. Safe travels over here to the States, and I look forward to it. We'll get you back on, and we'll talk about all of that.
Cheers, Jimmy. Bye.
Thank you, David. David Icke, everybody, live from the UK. The new book is Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. The links are over at jimmychurchradio.com. It is an amazing read. The one and only David Icke. All right, I'm going to take a break. I'll be right back, and I'll open up the phone lines. Thank you, David.